Title: The Architecture of the Subtle Body. The Architecture of the Subtle Body. A biophysical unification of GLYMPHO-VASOMOTOR fields, bone mechanotransduction, Eastern energetics, and Ajātavāda Advaita Vedānta. Introduction. For decades we've been told that our conscious awareness is just a byproduct of neural computation, leaving the body's fluid, skeletal and fascial systems as little more than passive plumbing. This view, however, is being challenged by an emerging scientific convergence. By synthesizing the fluid mechanics of the GLYMPHO-VASOMOTOR field, GVF theory, the macroscopic continuity of the body-wide interstitial fascial web, and the complex crystalline physics of bone mechanotransduction, we are beginning to see the outlines of a holistic electromagnetic framework. These findings resonate deeply with the ancient experiential maps of Qi, traditional Chinese medicine, and Prāṇa yogic philosophy. The entire system finds a compelling metaphysical resolution within the radical non-dualism of Ajātavāda Advaita Vedānta, where the biological instrument is recognized not as the creator of consciousness, but as a persistent autonomous appearance within the unoriginated self. My own journey on this path has spanned multiple decades, during which I have sought to reconcile Taoist, Vedantic, and modern scientific categorical frameworks. This hypothesis emerged from my investigation into the glymphatic vasomotor field theory, which catalyzed the synthesis of the biophysical and metaphysical data points presented below. This article is not a definitive scientific treatise, but an invitation to explore the possibility of a unified somatic framework, one where our biological instrument is viewed not as the creator of consciousness, but as a dynamic, resonant interface for the unoriginated self. Part 1. The Cranial Engine. GLYMPHO-VASOMOTOR field theory. The foundation of this somatic unification begins within the cranium, shifting the scientific spotlight from isolated neurons to a synchronized, non-neuronal scaffolding. GVF theory describes a macro-level electromagnetic field generated by the dynamic interaction of brain fluids, blood vessels, and extracellular spaces. The four-step biophysical loop. The operational mechanics of this cranial engine function via a highly coordinated, continuous hydrodynamic loop. 1. The vasomotor trigger. During states of deep rest or meditative stillness, the locus coeruleus within the brainstem drops its fast-waking chemical signals and initiates slow synchronized pulses of norepinephrine. This chemical pacing triggers vasomotion, the slow, involuntary rhythmic contraction and expansion of the cerebral blood vessels independent of the heartbeat. 2. The glymphatic hydrodynamic surge. This rhythmic vascular pumping acts as a mechanical engine, physically driving the surge of cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, through the perivascular spaces. The microscopic sleeve-like fluid channels that wrap entirely around the brain's arterial and venous trees. 3. The streaming potential. CSF is not inert water. It is a dense, highly conductive electrolyte solution packed with free-flowing charged ions, Na-CLK. As this ionic fluid is forced through the narrow perivascular channels, it shears against the fixed negative charges of the channel walls. This physical movement separates charges, creating a biophysical phenomenon known as a streaming potential. Moving fluid literally manufactures a macroscopic electrical voltage governed by the classical relation V equals zeta delta P epsilon by eta sigma. Where V represents the generated streaming potential, zeta is the zeta potential of the channel wall, delta P is the hydromechanical pressure gradient, epsilon is the fluid permittivity, eta is the fluid viscosity, and sigma is the electrical conductivity of the electrolyte substrate. 4. Apaptic coupling. This fluid-generated electrical potential does not remain isolated. Because the continuous blanket of CSF acts as an ideal macroscopic conductor, these slow oscillating voltage waves travel across the entire cranial vault. Via apaptic coupling direct field effects, this ambient electromagnetic field coaxes large populations of cortical neurons into perfect phase synchrony, thereby shaping the global, high-amplitude slow waves delta theta that characterize deep conscious integration. Part 2. The body-wide continuum. The interstitial facial web. The cranial fluid engine cannot be contained strictly within the skull. Histological tracking demonstrates that the perivascular channels housing the glymphatic pump do not terminate at the base of the brainstem. Instead, they transition directly into the adventitia, the outermost collagenous layer of blood vessels throughout the entire body. This adventitial layer is physically continuous with the deep planes of the fascial web. In 2018, the international anatomical community formalized the discovery of the interstitium, a body-wide interconnected network of fluid-filled microvacuoles woven directly into the structural collagen bands of fascia. This transforms our understanding of the body from a collection of isolated organs into a singular, continuous, hydraulic matrix. When a practitioner engages in structural alignment, slow rhythmic movement, or deep diaphragmatic breathing, they introduce mechanical pressure waves that pump interstitial fluid through this fascial grid. Crucially, collagen is a highly organized liquid crystalline piezoelectric material. When mechanical pressure waves or fluid shearing forces deform these crystalline triple helices, the fascia generates instantaneous structured bioelectric currents. The fascial web thus functions as an organism-wide high-speed semiconductor wiring system, instantly broadcasting the electrical potentials generated by movement and fluid flow throughout the entire somatic framework. Diagram 1. The Unified Somatic Hydroelectric Loop. Part 2. The Ancient Translation Chi, Prāṇa, and the Polarity of Consciousness. When these modern biophysical parameters are juxtaposed with Eastern internal cultivation systems, the conceptual overlap is absolute. Ancient masters lacking endomicroscopes or voltmeters utilized the highly refined poetic language of somatic experience to map the exact same structural and energetic phenomena. The Taoist polarity, yin and yang. In traditional Chinese medicine, qi is understood as the vital process, or whirlpool of energy, moving through a network of meridians. These meridians correspond precisely to the low-resistance, high-fluid content tracts within the interstitial fascial web. The relationship between cerebrospinal fluid and bioelectricity represents the literal somatic manifestation of yin and yang. Yin, the physical, dense, liquid substrate, the electrolyte-rich CSF, and interstitial fluid. It represents the receptive container, the rich chemical cauldron, and the structural foundation. Yang, Yoro, the immaterial, kinetic, active force, the bioelectric current, the streaming potential, and the macro-level electromagnetic field. In classical Chinese medical theory, it is stated that qi is the commander of the fluid. Fluid is the mother of qi. Translated into modern physics, this is an exact description of the streaming potential loop. The mechanical motion of the ionic fluid, yin, generates the bioelectric field, yang, and the resulting electrical field alters cellular membrane permeability, thereby directing the fluid's movement. The Vedic axis, prana and the nadis. While the Chinese paradigm focuses extensively on the functional balance of fluid pathways across organs, the Vedic and yogic traditions of prana focus on the central axis of the nervous system. Yogic anatomy maps the energetic body via three primary channels, nadis, sushumna, ida, and pingala. This represents a flawless structural blueprint of the central and autonomic nervous systems. Sushumna nade, the central hollow channel running through the spine, corresponding anatomically to the spinal canal and subarachnoid spaces filled with flowing CSF. Ida and Pingala nadis, the cool lunar and hot solar currents that cross the central axis, corresponding to the alternating parasympathetic and sympathetic trunks of the autonomic nervous system that govern heart rate variability and vasomotion. When a practitioner coordinates deep, pressurized breathwork, pranayama, with internal muscular locks, bandhas, they harness the respiratory and pelvic pumps to drive a high-velocity upward hydrodynamic wave through the spinal column. This structural surge forces a massive volume of CSF into the brain's ventricular chambers, mechanically compressing the calcite microcrystals embedded in the walls of the third ventricle and pineal gland. This extreme mechanical stress induces a massive piezoelectric discharge, driving the entire neuroelectromagnetic field into global phase synchrony, a state subjectively experienced as the illuminated void of samadhi. Part IV, deep consolidation, condensing qi into the marrow to generate jin. As cultivation deepens, systems of internal alchemy, nidan, introduce advanced protocols known as sui gong, bone marrow qi gong. In these practices, the practitioner intentionally draws the external ambient energy inward, condensing it past the skin, muscles and soft fascia directly into the skeletal core. The ultimate objective of this internal consolidation is the generation of Jin, internal elastic structural power, which stands in stark contrast to Li, raw, tense, localized muscular force. When translated into modern orthopedic medicine, this process maps precisely onto the principles of bone mechanotransduction. Bone tissue, composed of an intricate matrix of calcium hydroxyapatite crystals bound tightly to collagen fibers, is an extraordinarily efficient piezoelectric crystal. When a practitioner organizes their skeletal posture against gravity, as in the standing meditation of Zhanzhuang, or executes slow, highly pressurized spiraling movements, they apply a sustained mechanical load to the skeleton. This physical loading deforms the bone's crystalline matrix, generating a powerful localized piezoelectric voltage gradient. Deep within the hard cortical layers of the bone, mechanosensory cells called osteocytes reside inside fluid-filled channels known as canaliculi. The mechanical compression of the skeleton forces interstitial bone fluid to rush through these ultra-narrow canaliculi at high velocities. This fluid movement creates immense shear stress across the osteocytes, generating a dense, localized streaming potential. This microcurrent acts as a bioelectrical software switch that alters cellular behavior in the inner medullary cavity, the bone marrow. Rather than allowing the marrow to undergo fatty degeneration, the standard marker of sedentary aging, this highly charged electrical environment stimulates and preserves the red blood-producing mesenchymal stem cells, MSCs. This biological rejuvenation directly validates the ancient claim that bone breathing revitalizes the blood and marrow. When the skeletal core becomes highly charged, this bioelectric potential connects seamlessly with the surrounding periosteum and deep fascial anchors. The resulting force is Jin, a whole-body, elastic, effortless kinetic wave that discharges instantly through the skeletal matrix without requiring local muscular contraction. Part 5. The infinite expansion. From core to perceptive field. The ultimate maturation of internal cultivation requires the transition from internal consolidation to boundless external radiation. Having built an immensely dense, highly charged bioelectric core within the skeletal matrix, the practitioner learns to project this current into the space around them, expanding the microcosmic orbit from an internal tract into a body-enveloping, three-dimensional field. This progression obeys the fundamental laws of electromagnetic induction. According to Faraday's law, a highly coherent electrical current anchored within a dense crystalline conductor, the skeletal periosteal matrix, must project a corresponding magnetic field outward into the surrounding environment. Because the human body is an electrolytic mass, this structural circulation functions as a magneto-hydrodynamic generator, creating a highly organized, low-frequency toroidal biomagnetic field centered around the cardiospinal axis. Crucially, the scale and pervasiveness of this field are directly modulated by awareness. In advanced neurophysics, awareness is not a passive spectator confined within the skull. It is a dynamic field modulator. When a practitioner's attention is fragmented or contracted, the brain fires in high-frequency, low-amplitude, desynchronized patterns, causing the body's bioelectric outputs to remain chaotic and self-canceling. However, when the practitioner intentionally expands their field of awareness to encompass the entire space around them, the central nervous system undergoes global phase locking, shifting into highly synchronized, high-amplitude alpha, theta, or gamma rhythms. This internal synchronization causes the bioelectric currents across the bones, fascia, and fluid pathways to fire in perfect unison. Via constructive interference, the amplitudes of these fields multiply exponentially rather than add linearly, casting coherent biomagnetic field lines far beyond the physical skin layer. The field of awareness and the biophysical electromagnetic field become effectively indistinguishable. Part V. The ultimate resolution. Ajātavāda Advaita Vedānta. This entire multi-layered continuum, from the microscopic streaming potentials of the brain's perivascular spaces to the body-wide fascial web, the piezoelectric core of the bones, and the expanding toroidal biomagnetic field, reaches its absolute metaphysical resolution within the radical non-dualism of Ajātavāda Advaita Vedānta. Formulated by the sage Gaudapada and embodied by Sri Ramana Maharshi, Ajātavāda is the uncompromising doctrine of no origination. It asserts with absolute certainty that nothing has ever been created, that the objective universe possesses no independent existence, and that change is an entire optical illusion. There is only the unmoving, undifferentiated, luminous substratum of pure consciousness, Brahman. To reconcile the intricate physical mapping of GVF theory and Eastern energetics with Ajātavāda, one must employ the classic Vedantic distinction between the two levels of reality. Level of reality, Vedantic classification, status of physics and energy, ontological status. Empirical relative, Vyavaharika Satyam, CSF hydrodynamics, piezoelectric fascia, streaming potentials, chi Prāṇa, operational illusion Maya, the internal mechanics of the VR headset. Absolute non-dual, Paramarthika Satyam, completely non-existent, unborn and unoriginated, pure unmoving consciousness, Brahman, the only true reality. From the absolute perspective of Ajātavāda, the streaming potential equation, the bone marrow stem cell ignition, and the microcosmic plasma field do not represent a physical machine manufacturing awareness. Instead, pure actionless awareness dreams the fluid into motion, projecting the temporary sensations of time, space, and a localized individual ego. The bone marrow serves as the necessary dense physical anchor that stabilizes and conditions the biological instrument within the operational illusion. The microcosmic orbit organizes the systemic currents, and the expansion of awareness dissolves the localized boundaries entirely. At the ultimate threshold of the practice, the boundary between inside the body and outside in the room completely collapses. The practitioner realizes the ultimate truth. They are not a body projecting an energetic field into space. Rather, space itself, which is nothing but the unoriginated light of awareness, is holding the body. Like a clay pot that is shattered to reveal that the space inside and outside was always one, the fluid matrix of the mind dissolves back into the eternal, unchanging, unoriginated reality of the self.